Hi everyone. I ran into this issue with Visual Studio 2022, and it sounded like at least one or two other people in the class had a similar issue. And I think it's a problem with 2022, and maybe my install or a setting that I have. But essentially, what happens is when it creates the new application here, the Web Forms app, right? It defaults to Form 1, which isn't bad in itself because all the rest of them do. The problem is actually when you try to rename the form, it doesn't apply the changes across the board, so you end up with errors and you can't run the program. I just want to share with you guys how I was able to fix that, and there may be other ways, but this kind of worked for me. This works best with a clean new program. If you've already started changing things, just change them back to Form 1. Um, make sure everything is changed to Form 1 and hit the debug button or the run button here or hit F5, press F5, um, and get yourself back to this screen, ideally with this same Form 1 and this same Form 1 too. And that's important for just really one part of this, and that's that we do this properties window first. So make sure we're in our form1.vb in design mode, and we want to go into the workspace, make sure we have clicked on the actual Form 1. If you have other stuff in here, make sure you selected the overall form, and so you can rename it um, the same naming convention we have been, and that's the FRM entry, and just enter. And so what you'll notice here is this is the property for the object that you have selected. These are properties, individual properties of pieces of your program. This up here is actually the Explorer, the file tree. This is what would be essentially folders and files on your hard drive. Um, and so you want to go into this next. And the reason we want to do this first is because once you come here and you rename the file, it's going to throw an error that makes things a little bit more difficult. So I'll show you basically. So we've renamed it, what we normally would want to do. Um, and then we go to debug, and it hasn't cascaded any of our changes anywhere else. So we get an error. No, we don't want to run the last successful build. This hasn't had a successful build. It's a brand new program. So we say no, and it gives us this error, form 1 is not declared, and that's because we declared this as something else. And essentially what we want to do next is we want to change the file name. So we're going to go ahead and start getting everything in alignment with what this says. So we rename the file. So right click it, rename. You want to make sure you're renaming form1.vb. It'll make sure the changes go here. It should. If it doesn't, you'll just have to manually do it. But FRM, main entry to match the other. And this is what I'm talking about. So you get this error. And once you get to this stage, you're not going to be able to go back to the properties tab for a little bit. Um, there's really no reason to run this because it's not going to give you a different error here, which we'll go over in a moment. So what we want to do is what's happening here is it's trying to call a form that doesn't exist. And we know it doesn't exist because we've changed the name of it, and it's still looking for Form 1 for whatever reason. And the way we change that is we go to our project, not the solution, because this is our editable file that we work in, but the actual project itself, we need to change the settings of. So we go to the properties, we right click it, go to properties. So yours will be whatever you've named it. Mine's invoice. And we have the assembly name. And we want to look for startup object. This is going to be when you run the program, the first thing it opens, right, is going to be not submain, but our main entry form. So mine's form main entry. And once you click it, it should update on its own. You can actually close this little tab. Um, and we can leave that here for now. And we're going to come back here. Still says the same thing. So what we want to do is go ahead and run/debug again. And it's going to give us another error. And we're going to resolve that next. So Form 1 is not a member of invoice. Well, of course it's not because we've made it not a member because we don't want it to be Form 1. And Microsoft has just chosen not to make this intuitive and not cascade our changes through the rest of the program. So you would think it would. In none of the other versions it does, but 2022 it does not. So how we fix this is we look for application.designer. This is where it's at, the file we're looking for, and that's going to be up here. And once we get there, it's line 35. So there is not a direct match, but you see application events. That's kind of okay. Application. Go down to my application. And then this one's kind of intuitive because it's on create main form. And we'll it is kind of our main form, so we wanted to create that, and that makes sense. So that's kind of I don't know if these are methods or a function. Um, my terminology for Visual Basic is pretty bad. Um, but we are now here. You can see up here it's application.designer.vb. That's the right file. And now we're looking for line 35. There's a screwdriver, which may or may not be connected to our error. This is highlighted in green, so it stands out. But line 35 is a piece of what started in line 34. So it's indented, which means it's probably some sort of process that happens inside of this function up here. Um, and you can already see Form 1 sticks out. It is not supposed to be Form 1, and this is our last thing that we should have to fix. So we change it to form, just like we've been doing, main entry, and you can tab away from that. If you hit enter, it'll work, but it'll just create an empty line of code down here, and this doesn't visually appease me. So um, that should fix everything. You see your error's gone down here, so you can go ahead and hit debug or run, or press F5, and it should load the program correctly, and that should resolve the issue. I don't know yet if you have to do this for every form you add, or if it's just the initial one because of the way it defaults. Um, but hopefully this helps everybody that was having issues with getting the form named, and it should be helpful down the road when we have to have multiple forms and don't want to sift through 1, 2, 3, 4.